Hello there.
And welcome back to the Progress Paradigm, where today I'll be looking at Roland Emmerich's renowned 1996 sci-fi action movie Independence Day and its somewhat less renowned sequel Independence Day Resurgence, which followed some 20 years later. This video won't be a straight comparison between the two movies, partly because the 1996 movie is clearly way better than Resurgence, but rather a look at how the differences between the two movies reflect the changes in the world and society between 1996 and 2016. The length of time between the release of the first and second movies offers an interesting opportunity in this regard, so let's get to it. Section 1. Geopolitical changes. Independence Day is a far more America-centric movie than Resurgence, which, in contrast, has a far more international character to it. Independence Day's very cool battle scenes almost exclusively focus on the US military, which is depicted as the dominant military force on the planet, leading humanity's counterattack against the alien invaders. In contrast, in Resurgence, Earth is defended by an international squadron of fighter pilots from a variety of different nations. Independence Day also showcases a series of famous US landmarks throughout the movie, acting almost as a tourism advert for the country. Iconic locations such as the Empire State Building, the White House, the Washington Monument and the Grand Canyon, to name but a few, are all featured at key parts of the story. Contrast this with Resurgence, where we see a far more frequent use of international symbols, locations, heads of foreign states, as well as non-American characters. On screen, locations and societies in places like Africa and Asia are shown in a more positive light, to be more advanced and developed societies than they were in Independence Day, reflecting increasing cultural awareness and sensitivity over how cultures in these parts of the world should be portrayed. Finally, Resurgence barely mentions Independence Day as an American celebration, despite being set during the same period as its 1996 prequel. The reason that the date is significant in Resurgence is more because it marks 20 years since the alien invasion seen in the first movie. This is completely different to the original 1996 movie, which features far more frequent references being made to the celebration. So why is the 96 Independence Day far more America-centric than Resurgence? Well, one reason is that Resurgence reflects the great changes in the geopolitical landscape of the world since the filming of the first movie. The first movie was made during a period just after the end of the Cold War, when the domination of American economic, diplomatic and cultural power was undisputed. After the end of the Second World War, both the USA and the Soviet Union emerged as the two most powerful nations on the planet. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, leaving America unchallenged as the most powerful nation on Earth. The 96 movie reflects this American dominance and confidence both in its US-centric story and its championing of US military might. By the time Resurgence was released in 2016, the world had changed. Whilst the US remains arguably the most powerful nation on Earth, events such as 9/11, the 2007 Iraq counterinsurgency, and the 2008 financial crash have seen the power of the USA seriously challenged. The US is now also rivaled economically by rising powers such as Brazil, India, Russia, and most importantly, China. The need to appeal to the Chinese market has led to China and Chinese actors enjoying increased screen presence in major US-made movies. Resurgence is no exception, with the prominent Chinese actress Angela Young-Wing cast as the character Rain Lao. Section 2. Social justice. The effects of progressive ideas and cultural movements such as feminism and social justice are far more visible in Resurgence than they are in Independence Day. For example, in Resurgence we see a female president of the United States. Will Smith's wife Jasmine has gone from being a stripper in the first movie to being a doctor in the next. Finally, ethnic minority and female characters on the whole play a more significant role in the story of Resurgence rather than simply providing a foil for a less diverse main cast as they do in Independence Day. A key reason for this being the case is that social justice movements that aim to empower and elevate women and people from minority groups have gained far more prominence in the interval between the two movies. Cultural phenomena such as the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and the Me Too movement have served to accelerate this process, and we are now seeing an increasing number of women and individuals from minority groups gain prominent roles in big budget movies. Resurgence is once again no exception to this trend. Chapter 3: The Mirroring of Real-World Fears. The method that the aliens in Independence Day use to destroy cities and the way that the aliens are defeated both mirror fears that would have been held by many over societal collapse and the novelty of emerging technology at the time. The '96 movie shows the aliens firing down energy beams of destruction on New York, Washington DC, and Los Angeles. The effect of the alien weaponry on these cities is similar to that of a nuclear bomb. What is interesting about this is that, as mentioned before, this movie was filmed a short time after the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, the overriding fear in Western societies would have been of a nuclear strike by the Soviet Union. This particular fear was stoked during certain flashpoints of the Cold War, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. These scenes in Independence Day are reflective of the fears of the wide-scale urban destruction that nuclear weapons could bring. It's a fear that would still have been at the forefront of many in the 1990s. This attitude is further reflected in this movie when we see the president and the heads of the military agonising over whether to launch nuclear weapons against the alien invaders over American soil. The decision to use nuclear weapons is not taken lightly, and the consequences of using them clearly weigh on the minds of the characters. In Resurgence, the use of nukes is authorised with considerably less debate, perhaps demonstrating how the threat of nuclear war is no longer at the forefront of societal fears at this point. Ultimately, in the '96 movie, humanity is able to defeat the aliens via the use of a computer virus, which reflects the relative novelty of computer technology that was emerging at the time. Nowadays, with smartphone and computer technology commonplace, and with great leaps having been made in the tech industry, this method of defeating the aliens is sometimes mocked by 21st century audiences as it comes across as quite dated. Of course, this wasn't the case at the time. In Resurgence, the way that the gigantic alien ship causes areas near the coastline to become flooded can be seen to be evocative of scenes after Hurricane Katrina, and indeed anywhere around the world following a natural disaster. This possibly reflects how fears of natural disasters and climate change have become more relatable to 21st century audiences. Chapter 4: Changes in the Real World. The differences between the two movies also reflect various other societal changes and cultural shifts in perception. The obvious things to point out are how Resurgence features far more CGI effects than Independence Day, showing how CGI technology and capability have grown in the years between the two movies. The storyline of Resurgence also ends up becoming very big picture and abstract, as we learn that the aliens, who are called the Harvesters, have actually driven many species on different planets to the brink of extinction. The refugees from these planets are all settled on a separate world, and there is a mysterious spherical robot who wants to galvanise these species into an intergalactic resistance. This contrasts completely to the more realistic and grounded feel of Independence Day, which had a far simpler story. The main reason for this difference is that Resurgence was intended to be the first in a new series of Independence Day films, reflecting the modern trend of franchising, or making/rebooting a movie with the intent of making several more within that universe. This is a very modern trend which has been brought about by the unparalleled success of franchises such as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This sort of strategic thinking was nowhere near as prominent in the 90s, and it shows in the '96 movie. Finally, the '96 movie draws a lot from established tropes and cliches from the alien invasion genre. We see flying saucers, alien abduction, energy weapons, Area 51, alien autopsy and the Roswell incident all mentioned or seen on screen. Resurgence doesn't draw on as many of these cliches in its representation of alien life, indicative of how audience expectations of alien movies have changed and how movies have had to change with them. Alien invasion movies cannot simply fall back on these old cliches and expect audiences to be amazed anymore. They have to offer something different. Resurgence tries to do this, just not very successfully. That's all for now. Thank you for watching The Progress Paradigm, and I'll see you again soon.